Throughout the centuries, humanity has witnessed enigmas that defy logic, mysteries that seem to whisper secrets from the shadows of history. From lost civilizations to inexplicable artifacts, each story is a door to the unknown, an invitation to imagine what could have been. Today, we will take you on a journey through the most fascinating and ancient mysteries that remain unsolved, leaving entire generations searching for answers among ruins, legends, and myths. If you're passionate about these stories and want to explore more about the secrets of the past, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these unique stories. Also, leave us a comment telling us which of these mysteries has impacted you the most or which one you would like to explore on a quiet morning in 1795. As the sun was just beginning to light up the coast of Nova Scotia, a young explorer ventured into the mysterious forests of Oak Island. There, amid the whispers of the wind and the rustling of the leaves, his eyes fell on a circular depression in the ground surrounded by ancient trees like silent guardians. Intrigued, Daniel felt that this place hid more than just roots and stones. Something ancient seemed to pulsate beneath his feet. With the help of his friends, he began to dig, and with each stroke of the shovel, the earth revealed a deeper secret. 10 feet down, they found the first layer of wood, an artificial floor that defied logic. However, as they advanced, the ground seemed to fight against them. More layers of wood and coconut fibers appeared, a material impossible to find in that region. It was as if a calculating mind had designed an underground labyrinth. Pirate stories intertwined with reality. Could this be the hiding place of an invaluable treasure? As the legends of Captain Kidd and the Templars mingled in their thoughts, the whole seemed to mock their efforts. Suddenly, a blast of icy water gushed from the depths. It was as if the island itself was alive, jealously protecting its secrets. Decades later, others continued the excavation. Each new team arrived armed with dreams and advanced technology, but the pit, like a relentless guardian, threw traps at them. Sudden floods, collapses, and mysterious inscriptions on stone that spoke of riches but also of warnings. The objects found, such as fragments of parchment, golden chains, and tools, fueled the flame of curiosity. But the real treasure remained hidden. The flame of curiosity, but the real treasure remained elusive. The locals began to talk of a curse. 7 would die before the secret was revealed. The rumors seemed to carry weight, as fatal accidents marked the history of the seekers. As time went on, the mysteries of Oak Island became intertwined with conspiracy theories. Some claimed that the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail lay buried there, while others suspected that the island hid darker secrets related to secret societies. When twilight covered Egypt with golden and purple hues, the desert sands seemed to hold a solemn silence. It was in those dark days of the year 30 BC, after the fall of Alexandria, when Cleopatra and Mark Antony met their tragic end. The queen, surrounded by symbols of power and charm, chose death over humiliation. Antony, upon receiving the news, sank into despair and joined her in eternity. It is said that Octavian, moved by a strange mixture of respect and political pragmatism, allowed them both to be buried together. Ancient texts speak of a tomb that combined Egyptian majesty with Roman grandeur, standing near the Temple of Isis between columns and hieroglyphics that sang of the exploits of the last pharaoh. The craftsmen, in a final effort to honor her, decorated the chambers with reliefs narrating her union with Antony, as if they wanted to immortalize their love in stone. However, time was cruel to that masterpiece. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and looting erased much of ancient Alexandria, leaving only fragments of a glorious past. The waters of the Mediterranean engulfed temples and palaces, and with them, perhaps the queen's tomb. Some say that the tomb lies at the bottom of the sea, where fish swim among submerged ruins in Taposiris Magna, a place marked by ruins and legends. Modern archaeologists have excavated tirelessly there and found hidden coins bearing the image of Cleopatra and statues that seem to watch from the shadows. But the question remains, Where is the tomb of Cleopatra? Hidden coins bearing the image of Cleopatra and statues that seem to watch from the shadows. But the question remains, is this their resting place, or just another mirage in the desert? The search for the tomb of Cleopatra and Mark Antony is not just an archaeological quest. It is a race against time to decipher a crucial chapter in history. If the burial chambers are discovered, they could shed light on their last days, their funeral rites, and the magnitude of their love. What secrets would the walls of that final resting place hold? What objects, words, or symbols rest with them in the desert under the Egyptian moon? The sand seemed to move as if they know the answer, but the mystery remains intact, like a riddle waiting for the right explorer. Meanwhile, the story of Cleopatra and Mark Antony lives on, woven into the heart of Mexico. In a shipwreck forgotten for centuries lay an object that defied the understanding of its time. It was 1901 when a group of divers exploring the remains of a Roman ship off the island of Antikythera found among amphorae and statues a jumble of corroded bronze and worn gears. At first, it looked like an insignificant artifact, but that fragment contained a secret that would forever change the view of the past. The object, known as the Antikythera mechanism, turned out to be a marvel of ancient engineering. The gears were arranged with a precision that was not believed possible in classical times. Over time, researchers deciphered that it was a complex astronomical device capable of accurately predicting eclipses, planetary movements, and lunar cycles. But who had designed such a marvel? How could such an advanced computer have existed in the ancient world? Modern scientists marveled at the inscriptions engraved on the bronze plates. Those words written in Greek seemed like instructions for interpreting the movements of the heavens. The mechanism had dozens of interconnected gears, each carved with a perfection that suggested centuries of accumulated knowledge. Was this the legacy of Archimedes or some other brilliant mind lost in time? The shipwreck that housed it was a merchant vessel loaded with treasures from the Mediterranean, but the mechanism stood out as an enigma amid the riches. Its gears turned as smoothly as a modern clock, aligning with the cosmos as if touched by the hand of a god. The ancient Greeks who looked to the stars for answers had created a machine that interpreted them. The reconstruction of the device revealed a system of wheels that marked the positions of the planets, a mobile zodiac, and a solar calendar. It was as if the builders had trapped the universe in a bronze box. Each turn of its gears took the observer on a journey through the heavens, allowing them to understand the mysteries of the stars. However, the exact purpose of the mechanism remains a mystery. Was it a tool for navigators, a ceremonial object, or an educational device? Some believe that its complexity suggests knowledge, transmitted by even older civilizations or even by beings from beyond this world. Meanwhile, the place where it was found continues to be visited by explorers and dreamers, hoping to find more pieces of this cosmic puzzle beneath the waves of the Aegean Sea. Perhaps other machines lie dormant, waiting to tell stories of an ancient world more advanced than we could ever imagine. The Antikythera mechanism is a reminder that the past is full of wonders that defy our expectations in their silence. It speaks of a humanity that even in ancient times dared to reach for the stars and capture their eternal dance. When the rising sun gilded the temples of Amarna, the figure of Nefertiti shone like a deity. The queen, famous for her beauty and her role in the religious revolution of Akhenaten, ruled alongside her husband during a period of radical change. Her image, carved in reliefs and sculptures, became a symbol of power and grace. But like the sun they worshipped, her presence faded without a trace. Nefertiti's disappearance has puzzled historians and archaeologists for centuries. The records that once celebrated her as the great royal wife suddenly disappeared. Some believe she fell from grace, while others suggest she took on a new role under a different name. Theories range from political conspiracy to spiritual retreat. The temples of Amarna, a city built to honor the god Aten, hold clues to her reign but also to her mysterious end. The walls of the great solar temple tell incomplete stories, and the statues that represented her were destroyed as if time itself wanted to erase her legacy. Was it an act of revenge, a political strategy, or simple oversight? In the royal tombs of the Valley of the Kings, archaeologists have searched for a final resting place. However, the dark corridors and sealed chambers have been reluctant to reveal their secret. Some believe she may have been buried alongside Akhenaten, but excavations in her tomb have not provided any definitive answers. The discovery of a hidden chamber in Tutankhamun's tomb fueled new hopes. It is theorized that Nefertiti could be behind those walls, resting alongside the young pharaoh who, according to some, was her son. However, the evidence has been inconclusive, leaving experts divided between skepticism and anticipation. Meanwhile, her bust, one of the most iconic works of Egyptian art, rests in the Berlin Museum, observing visitors with her enigmatic gaze. The perfection of her face and the serenity of her expression seem to hold the key to her story. But Nefertiti, like a sphinx, remains silent. Her disappearance raises questions that echo through the centuries. Was she the victim of blind intrigue? Did she abandon power for personal or religious reasons? Or perhaps her story, like so many others, was lost in the sands of time, leaving only an echo of what once was. While archaeologists and scholars continue their search, the mystery of Nefertiti remains intact. It is a story that, like the Nile, flows through history, always changing, always elusive. And so the forgotten queen continues to fascinate the world, an enigma that invites us to dream and explore the secrets of ancient Egypt. Under the scorching sun of ancient Mesopotamia, Sumerian priests raised their hands to the sky, invoking the Anunnaki gods, whose names echoed on clay tablets, engraved with cuneiform. According to legend, these beings descended from the sky to shape the world and rule over humans. But were they true gods or visitors from beyond the stars? The stories of the Anunnaki described majestic beings of superhuman proportions who possessed vast knowledge and abilities that seemed magical. In the cities of Uruk, Nippur, and Eridu, it was said that the Anunnaki had designed temples and ziggurats that connected the earth to the sky. These structures, with their perfect geometry, seem to reflect an advanced understanding of the cosmos. The creation myth recorded on Sumerian tablets told how the Anunnaki molded the first humans from mud by mixing clay with the blood of a fallen god. These first humans were created to work the land and serve the gods who ruled them from the heavens. But over time, the Anunnaki seemed to have lost interest in their creation, leaving humanity to carve out its own destiny. At the heart of these stories was the figure of Enki, the god of water and wisdom, who rebelled against the order established by his brother Enlil. According to the myths, Enki shared secrets with humans, teaching them how to build cities and interpret the stars. Some modern theorists suggest that these stories could be accounts of real contact with advanced civilizations reinterpreted by the Sumerians as divine encounters. The legends of the Anunnaki were not limited to creation. They also spoke of a great catastrophe, a flood sent to purge the world. The compassionate Enki warns the Usadra, the Sumerian Noah, to build an ark and preserve life. This account, similar to biblical stories, led many to wonder if ancient cultures shared a common memory of their origins. The mystery of the Anunnaki deepened with the appearance of tablets mentioning the term Nibiru, a supposed planet from which the gods descended. Some theorists linked this to the idea of an unknown planet in our solar system. Although the scientific community dismissed such claims as fantasy, while the clay tablets continue to reveal fragments of their history, the Anunnaki remain shrouded in mystery. They represent a bridge between the earthly and the heavenly, an unanswered question that reminds us how vast and unknown our past is. The myths of the Anunnaki invite us to look up at the sky with the same mixture of awe and curiosity that the Sumerians felt thousands of years ago. They're a legacy of our endless quest to understand humanity's place in the cosmos. Beneath the arid terrain of Shan'in, The province of Changsha, China, lies one of the most fascinating archaeological discoveries in history. The Terracotta Army was just another day in 1974 when farmers digging for water unearthed fragments of what appeared to be human figures. What they found was only the tip of the iceberg of a secret that had remained buried for more than 2,000 years. When archaeologists arrived at the site, they discovered thousands of life-size warriors, each one unique in expression and detail. Their armor, weapons, and terracotta horses looked ready for eternal battle. This army had been created to protect the first emperor of China, Qin Shi, on his journey to the afterlife. According to legend, Qin Shi had sought immortality during his lifetime, but when he failed to find it, he decided to build an empire in the underworld. The place was immense, a funerary complex that stretched for miles with tunnels and chambers that reflected the emperor's greatness. At the center of it all, still unexcavated, its tomb, which according to stories is protected by traps and rivers of mercury that flow as symbols of his power. The decision to bury these figures poses a riddle. Was it simply a demonstration of power, or was there a deeper spiritual meaning? Each carefully modeled statue seemed to tell a story. There were archers, generals, infantry, and horses, all positioned in battle formation. The details were astonishing, from their clothing to the expressions on their faces. It was clear that the craftsmen had devoted years, even decades, to this task, working under the emperor's orders and leaving behind a legacy that would defy time. Ancient texts suggested that Qin Shi feared the spirits and his dead enemies as much as the living. This army was not only a symbol of his earthly dominion, but also a barrier against the invisible forces of the underworld. But what led the emperor to imagine such a necessity? Perhaps it was his obsession with immortality and his belief that the afterlife would be as dangerous as the world he was leaving behind. The process of creating the army was equally intriguing. It is believed that the artisans used molds for the main parts, but each figure was personalized with unique details, as if the sculptors wanted to give these figures their own essence. Perhaps each warrior represented someone real from Qin's army. This detail fuels the theory that these statues were more than simple symbolic guardians. As more figures were unearthed, additional mysteries emerged. Some statues were damaged, as if they had been deliberately destroyed. Archaeologists found evidence of fires and looting at the site, suggesting that the complex may have been attacked after the emperor's death. It was the rebels of the succeeding dynasty who attempted to erase the legacy of Qin Shi. The discovery of the warriors of Xi'an transports us to a time of excessive ambition and deeply held beliefs about life and death. Each figure seems to carry the weight of a story we have not yet fully deciphered, a tale of power, fear, and the eternal quest for transcendence. As the Terracotta Army continues its eternal vigil, researchers continue to unravel the secrets of this incredible find. Each new discovery broadens our understanding, but also deepens the mystery of Qin Shi. Even in death, he achieved what he so desired to be. Remembered forever in the arid desert of Sudan, far from the iconic pyramids of Giza, stand the pyramids of Nubia, structures that seem to echo the grandeur of ancient Egypt but tell a story of their own. These pyramids, more numerous than those of Egypt, are a testament to the kingdom of Kush, a civilization that flourished south of the Nile and rivaled its neighbors in splendor. North, the Nubian pyramids, smaller and steeper than their Egyptian counterparts, were built as tombs for the kings and queens of Kush. Although they share certain similarities with the Egyptian pyramids, such as their funerary function and astronomical alignment, they have unique characteristics that distinguish each one. They seem to echo an adapted tradition, a reflection of how the Kushites took external influences and molded them into their own identity. The kingdom of Kush had a complex relationship with Egypt for centuries. The Kushites fought, and intermingled culturally with the Egyptians at one point, even ruled Egypt as the 25th dynasty, known as the Dynasty of the Black Pharaohs. However, the pyramids of Nubia are not simply an imitation. They represent a renaissance of Egyptian traditions adapted to local beliefs and needs. The most emblematic site of these constructions is Meroe, the capital of the Kingdom of Kush. There, the pyramids rise in a desolate landscape. Casting long shadows, each tomb is decorated with reliefs that tell stories of the deceased and their journey to the afterlife. The scenes depict a pantheon of gods that includes both Egyptian deities and exclusively Kushite divinities, a testament to the cultural richness of the kingdom. Archaeologists have long debated how the Kushites acquired the architectural knowledge to build these structures. Some argue that they were directly influenced by the Egyptians, while others suggest that they developed their own techniques. Based on a shared understanding of the Nile as a source of life and spirituality, the remains of tools and inscriptions in the tombs indicate a connection, but also a distinctive evolution. The Nubian pyramids are much more than simple funerary monuments. They are symbols of power, spirituality, and cultural resilience. During the centuries when Egypt declined, Kush prospered, showing the world that the civilizations south of the Nile were just as sophisticated and ambitious as the inscriptions suggest. The kings of Kush describe themselves not only as rulers of the land, but as intermediaries between the gods and their people. The discovery of these pyramids in the 19th century caused amazement and fascination in the Western world. However, looting and neglect also left their mark, taking away priceless treasures and damaging structures that had withstood centuries of neglect. Despite these challenges, the pyramids of Nubia stand tall, defying time and telling their stories to those who visit them. Archaeologists continue to explore these tombs. It is clear that there is still much to discover. Each pyramid, with its reliefs and buried secrets, is a portal to the past that invites us to reflect on human ingenuity and the cultural diversity of ancient civilizations. Just as the waters of the Nile connected Egypt and Kush, these structures connect us to a forgotten chapter of our shared history in the heart of ancient Mesopotamia. In a Babylon shrouded in mystery and magnificence, they stood. According to ancient accounts, the Hanging Gardens, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, were not simple gardens. They were a testament to humanity's ability to define nature itself. However, their existence remains an enigma that has puzzled historians and archaeologists for centuries. According to legend, these gardens were created by King Nebuchadnezzar II for his wife Amytis, a princess of Media who longed for the green mountains of her homeland. In a gesture of love, and the king ordered the construction of terraced gardens where vegetation flourished in the middle of the desert. Artificial waterfalls flowed from above, fed by an intricate irrigation system that defied the technology of the time. Descriptions speak of an earthly paradise that seemed to float in the air, leaving visitors stunned. However, the Hanging Gardens have never been found. Excavations in Babylon have not revealed any remains that match these descriptions. This has led some experts to question whether they really existed in Babylon or if they were actually located in another city, such as Nineveh. Others suggest that they may have been a literary creation, a metaphor for fertility and the power of the empire. Despite the lack of physical evidence, the stories of the gardens have left an indelible mark on history. Ancient texts describe a system of pulleys and winches that carried water from the Euphrates River to the levels of the terraces. If it did exist, this system would have been an engineering achievement comparable to the most impressive technological advances of antiquity. The mystery of the Hanging Gardens also raises questions about how such a monumental structure could have been built and maintained. The necessary materials, such as stones and fertile soil, would have had to be transported from great distances. In addition, the dry climate of Mesopotamia would have required constant effort to keep the vegetation alive and thriving. Every detail suggests an undertaking of colossal proportions. Ancient literature, including the works of Greek historians such as Strabo and Philo of Byzantium, is the main source of information about the gardens. However, these inscriptions are often based on second-hand accounts, leaving room for interpretation and exaggeration. The texts speak of fruit trees, exotic flowers, and aromatic herbs that grew in an almost magical environment, lifting the spirits of those who contemplated them. Some researchers believe that the Hanging Gardens were not a physical place, but an idealized representation of power and the human capacity to create beauty in the middle of the desert. In this sense, the gardens would be a symbol rather than a tangible reality, a reminder that imagination can be as powerful as the stones and bricks in the red granite quarries of Aswan. Under the scorching Egyptian desert sun lies an unfinished work that reveals both the ambition as well as the challenges of the ancient Egyptians. The unfinished obelisk, the largest ever conceived, remains in its original location, offering a unique glimpse into the construction process of these colossal monuments carved directly from the bedrock. This obelisk would have reached a height of almost 42 m and weighed over 1,000 tons. Craftsmen began working on the obelisk with simple tools made of dolerite, striking the granite with precision and patience to free the monumental shape from the stone. However, at some point during the process, a crack appeared in the structure, making it impossible to continue without risk of fracture. Instead of trying to repair it, the workers abandoned the project, leaving behind a relic of what could have been. The decision to build an obelisk of such magnitude raises fascinating questions. Who was it intended for? Some suggest that it could have been commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut, known for her love of architecture. Monument, if completed, the obelisk would have been a symbol of power and divine connection. Completed, the obelisk would have been a symbol of power and divine connection, probably erected in the temple of Ammonius at Karnak, where other obelisks still stand in majestic solitude. The unfinished obelisk not only reveals the ambitions of the Egyptians, but also the technical challenges they faced. Moving a structure of such size would have required extraordinary ingenuity. Ancient texts and artistic representation suggest that the Egyptians used sledges, wooden rollers, and water channels to transport obelisks from the quarries to their final destination. However, an obelisk of this size would have exceeded even their most advanced capabilities. Exploring the quarries of Aswan is like stepping back in time. The marks left by tools are still visible on the granite, silent witnesses to the efforts of the craftsmen. Walking around the site, one cannot help but imagine the bustle of activity, the rhythmic sound of tools, the shouts of the foreman, and the suffocating heat that enveloped the workers off the foreman, and the suffocating heat that enveloped the workers is a tangible reminder of the humanity behind the architectural wonders of ancient Egypt. The crack that halted the construction of the unfinished obelisk is more than a flaw. It is a symbol of the limits of ancient technology. Despite their skill and dedication, the Egyptians were vulnerable to the whims of nature. This imperfection connects us to the craftsmen, reminding us that although they achieved incredible feats, they also faced failures and challenges that humanize their legacy. The obelisk. Unfinished obelisk remains in Aswan as a monument to both human ambition and limitations. A work that inspires awe and reflection in equal measure. It is a testament to the dedication of the ancient Egyptians and the fragility of their dreams in the face of the resistance of stone. Through it, their history lives on, resonating in the present with the same force with which the granite resisted their efforts in the vast deserts and plateaus of what is now the southwestern United States. The Anasazi people left behind a monumental legacy of architecture and mystery in the cliffs of Mesa Verde and the valleys of Chaco Canyon. They erected stone cities that seemed to defy the logic of their arid environment. However, their abrupt disappearance in the 11th century AD left archaeologists and storytellers intrigued for centuries. High on a steep cliff, an Anasazi village nestled against the rock with terraces and rooms that seemed to hang from the stone walls. The desert sun embraced them, but the Anasi had learned to master their environment. Systems of canals and reservoirs captured every drop of water, feeding their crops of corn, beans, and squash. At night, under a star-studded sky, stories were passed around the fire, tales of their ancestors and the gods who inhabited the mountains. One day, without warning, silence enveloped the villages. The houses were empty, tools abandoned in the middle of their work, and the traces of their departure vanish with the desert wind. The cliffs that once echoed with laughter and human voices were left silent, as if the Anasazi had dissolved into time. But what led them to abandon their homes? Some believe that climate change was their executioner. A prolonged drought may have depleted their resources, forcing them to seek more fertile lands. Others suggest internal conflicts, disputes over scarce resources, or tensions between clans. There are those who whisper darker stories of external depressions from other groups, or even ritual sacrifices in a desperate attempt to appease the gods. In the ruins of Chaco Canyon, archaeologists found traces of ceremonies that spoke of a deep connection with the spiritual world. Large cuevas, underground chambers, served as ritual centers where the Anasazi gathered to honor their deities. Perhaps in their departure, they sought new horizons where they could continue to live under the protection of their beliefs. The architecture they left behind is a testament to their ingenuity. The walls, perfectly aligned with the solar cycles and the stars, suggest advanced astronomical knowledge. Their straight paths, stretching for miles, seem to lead to unknown destinations, traced with a precision that still eludes modern understanding. Some modern descendants, such as the Hopi and Sunni peoples, consider the Anasazi their ancestors. Their oral accounts speak of migrations guided by spiritual signs, movements seeking balance and harmony with the universe. According to these traditions, the Anasazi did not simply disappear, but continued on their path toward a predestined destination. Along the coast of the state of Gujarat in India, the waves of the Arabian Sea hide a 1,000-year-old enigma. Beneath its waters lie the remains of a submerged city that many believe to be the legendary Dwarka, the capital of the god Krishna. This city, described in the sacred texts of the Mahabharata, has fueled the imagination of devotees and explorers for centuries. In ancient texts, Dwarka is described as a magnificent city built on the coast by Krishna himself. Its palaces sparkled with gems and gold, and its streets bustled with activity. According to legend, after Krishna's death, the city was swallowed by the sea, an act of divine will to preserve its sanctity and hide it from mortal eyes. In recent decades, archaeologists have discovered submerged structures near modern-day Dwarka. Pillars and stone walls, paths that seem to lead to temples and residences, all suggest the existence of a city in the depths. Dating methods indicate that these ruins could be thousands of years old, connecting them to the era mentioned in ancient texts. As divers explore the seabed, they find artifacts that could belong to a civilization advanced for its time. Ceramic vessels, metal tools, and stone carvings emerge from the underwater mud, silent witnesses of a society that may have once existed. Beyond the myth, however, the waters also hold their secrets, obscuring details that could confirm whether this is truly the Dwarka of Krishna. The story of Dwarka is deeply intertwined with spiritual devotion for Hindus. The city is not just a physical place, but a symbol of the connection between the divine and the human. Pilgrimages to the modern city of Dwarka, which bears the same name, keep alive the memory of that submerged city. Local temples celebrate Krishna's exploits and the glory of his lost city. Mythology and archaeology intertwine in this case, blurring the lines between history and faith. While some experts argue that the ruins are evidence of a real civilization that inspired the myth, others insist that Dwarka remains a spiritual place, beyond the tangible. The debate continues as the waves continue to cover the past. For those who dive among the ruins, each dive is a search for answers and an encounter with the unknown. The waters of Dwarka hold an eerie serenity, as if the submerged city were patiently waiting to reveal its secrets. Every stone and every artifact found tells a fragmented story, like a puzzle whose solution seems within reach but always elusive. On the surface, fishing boats glide over a lost world, unaware of the wonders hidden beneath the waves. Dwarka remains a symbol of hope and mystery, a city that defies the limits of time and understanding. Will its enigma one day be completely unveiled? For now, the underwater city continues to fascinate those who seek to discover the truth behind the myth. In the vast plains of Mesopotamia, when kingdoms rose and fell in a constant struggle for power, a dark monolith emerged as a symbol of order and authority. The stele of Hammurabi, erected under the reign of the great Babylonian king. It was not just a carved stone, but a manifesto of how a kingdom should be ruled. Its basalt surface glistened under the Mesopotamian sun with engravings that seemed to whisper the will of the gods. The imposing figure of Hammurabi stood out at the top of the stele with his crown and staff facing the god Shamash, the dispenser of justice. It was a divine moment captured in stone, declaring that laws were not the creation of man, but divine mandates. This precisely carved scene evoked reverence and fear in those who contemplated it. Beneath this heavenly scene, more than 280 laws were inscribed in cuneiform script. Each line outlined specific rules, from the rights of farmers to punishments for serious crimes. These laws were clear, harsh, and in many cases brutal. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, proclaimed one of the most famous passages, reflecting a system of justice that sought balance but also control. The people of Babylon saw the stele as a tangible representation of the justice of the king, but more. Beyond being a simple legal code, the stele was also an instrument of propaganda. In every corner of the kingdom, people spoke of Hammurabi's wisdom, his closeness to the gods, and his divine duty to protect the weak and punish the wicked. The stele consolidated his image as the ideal ruler. As merchants, peasants, and judges consulted the inscribed laws, the presence of the monolith became a unifying force, but also sent a subtle message. The absolute power of the king was not to be questioned. Hammurabi's code not only governed human actions, but also affirmed the unbreakable authority of its creator. Centuries passed, and Babylon, like all great civilizations, fell into oblivion. However, the stele of Hammurabi survived, lost for generations, until it was rediscovered in the ruins of Susa, an ancient Persian enclave, as if it had been deliberately hidden from the passage of time. They're under the sands of history, waiting to be admired once again. The duality of the stele, as code and propaganda, continues to intrigue historians and curious minds alike. Meanwhile, the figure of Hammurabi stands immortal in his black basalt, looking to the future with the same determination he had thousands of years ago. In the sun-drenched hills of ancient Greece, stories were whispered about a man whose words had woven the foundations of Hellenic culture. Homer, the supposed author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, was a man shrouded in mystery. Who was this blind poet who narrated the great exploits of the Achaean and Trojan heroes? Was he a real man or a mythical figure created by the stories themselves? In the bustling markets and agoras of Greece, the rhapsodes recited Homer's epic verses. Their voices seemed to transcend time, echoing across the islands and city-states. Every word was charged with emotion, glory, tragedy, honor, and betrayal. Yet the figure behind these tales remained an enigma. Some imagined him as a blind, wandering old man, but wise man who traveled from town to town telling his stories. Others believed that Homer was not a man, but a group of poets who, generation after generation, had shaped the epics. His place of origin was equally uncertain. Smyrna, Chios, and other cities claimed to be his birthplace, although none could prove it. The style of his poems, full of detailed descriptions and vibrant characters, suggested a deep knowledge of war and humanity, but also revealed a careful construction, as if each word had been forged to withstand the passage of time. Could a single man have created such masterpieces, or was it the collective effort of a culture seeking to immortalize its values over the centuries? Scholars attempted to unravel the mystery. The texts were analyzed in search of clues about their author. Differences in style between the Iliad and the Odyssey led to theories of multiple authors. However, the ancient Greeks did not seem concerned with the author's identity of the author. For them, what mattered was the message, the connection with their gods and heroes. The statues of Homer erected long after his time depicted him as a blind sage. Crowned with laurels, his image became a symbol of wisdom and imagination, a cultural beacon for the Greeks and beyond. But even those statues were idealized, an interpretation of a man who may never have existed. In the echo of his verses, Homer lives on. His physical existence may be uncertain, but his spirit lives on. Verses. Homer lives on. His physical existence may be uncertain, but his spirit lives on in every word of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Thus, the unknown poet continues to guide dreamers, explorers, and storytellers who seek immortality in their own stories. In the depths of time, when maps of the world were still littered with mythical creatures and unexplored regions, there was talk of a magical spring. According to stories passed down by sailors and explorers, this spring possessed the ability to reverse time itself. Legends about the fountain of eternal youth were born in different corners of the ancient world, but their most resonant echoes are found in the tales of the peoples of the Mediterranean and the Americas. In classical Greece, the story of eternal youth was linked to the idea of nectar and ambrosia, foods reserved for the Olympian gods that guaranteed their immortality. But mortal and ephemeral humans could only dream of accessing such gifts. As these stories became intertwined with the myths of other cultures, people began to talk about a specific source, a place where the seas met and time had no power. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the New World, they heard stories from the indigenous peoples about a sacred place where the waters flowed with the promise of rejuvenation. According to the chronicles, it was Juan Ponce de Leon who became obsessed with finding this paradise. However, beyond the historical accounts, his expedition through the waters of what we now know as Florida seems more like a reflection of the universal desire to defeat aging. As Florida seems more like a reflection of the universal desire to defeat death than a real event. In other parts of the world, such as Asia, there is talk of a lake surrounded by mystical mountains whose reflections contain the secret of immortality. The ancient Persians also alluded to sacred rivers that granted longevity to those brave enough to enter their heavenly territories. In each case, the search was not only physical but spiritual, a journey towards self-knowledge and transcendence over the centuries. Poets and writers narrated the fountain as a metaphor for human greed and the price of defying natural laws. Folk tales warned of the consequences of drinking from these waters, where renewed youth could be accompanied by endless curses. The fountain became a symbol of the limits that mortals should not cross. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about the legend is how it has evolved over time. Renaissance alchemists reinterpreted it as a philosophical quest equated with the Philosopher's Stone. Philosopher's Stone. Later, Romantic literature described it as a mirror of humanity's deepest desires, the obsession with resisting mortality. In the vast plains of southeastern Europe, where rivers meander and mountains rise imposingly, there lived a civilization shrouded in mystery. The Thracians, an ancient people who flourished in what is now Bulgaria, northern Greece, and parts of Turkey, were described by the Greeks as brave warriors, skilled craftsmen, and worshippers of strange and wild gods. Strange and savage. But who were the Thracians really? And what legacy did they leave to the ancient world? The Thracians were not a single people, but a group of tribes that shared a language, traditions, and beliefs. They lived in fortified villages built on strategic hills from which they could observe the lands they cultivated and the valleys they fiercely defended. Their monumental tombs, decorated with frescoes, bore witness to their deep connection with spirituality and their belief in life after death. Death. Greek myths intertwine with Thracian stories, creating legendary figures such as Orpheus, the musician who descended into Hades and resurrected a Thracian king who fought in the Trojan War. According to accounts, the Thracians had an intimate relationship with wine and Dionysian rituals, which gave them a reputation for savagery among the Greeks. However, this perception concealed a rich and sophisticated culture whose goldsmiths created treasures of gold and silver that still fascinate the world today. On the battlefield, the Thracians were feared for their skill with the bow and their mastery of light cavalry. They allied themselves and fought against the Greeks, Persians, and Romans, adapting to the changes in military tactics of the Mediterranean. Their resistance and indomitable spirit are reflected in historical figures such as Spartacus, the Thracian slave who led the largest revolt against Rome. The Thracians also left their mark on religion. Their gods, although less known than the all, were powerful figures associated with nature and war. Their most revered god, Salmes, promised the faithful. The faithful, a concept that resonated deeply in their culture of heroes and warriors. Over time, the Thracians were assimilated by the empires that surrounded them, first by the Macedonians of Alexander the Great, and then by the Romans, who established provinces in their territories. However, their traditions survived, transforming and leaving traces in the popular culture of the Balkans and the Greek peninsula long before Athens and Sparta dominated the ancient world stage. A powerful civilization emerged between mountains and seas. The Mycenaean civilization, with its Cyclopean stone fortresses and its trade network that reached the farthest lands, stood as a beacon of culture and power, ruled by kings who lived in grandiose palaces, such as those of Mycenae and Pylos. This culture was the central axis of the myths that would later feed Homer and his epics. Mycenae was the heart of this world. Its walls, known as Cyclopean because of the belief that only giants could have built them, protected not only the citizens but also the riches accumulated through centuries of trade and conquest. Within these walls, the royal palace resounded with daily activity. Artisans creating gold jewelry, scribes engraving clay tablets with linear B writing, and priests performing elaborate rituals to appease the gods. But despite its splendor, the fate of the Mycenaeans turned grim toward the 11th century BC. Their cities began to crumble, the palaces that were once vibrant cultural centers were reduced to ruins. The tablets detailing the administration of a complex kingdom were no longer inscribed, and the trade that had once connected Mycenae with Egypt, Crete, and Anatolia vanished. It was as if a dark shadow had spread over the peninsula. There are many theories about its disappearance. Some believe that the mysterious sea peoples, invaders who ravaged the Mediterranean, played a crucial role. Others suggest that natural disasters, such as earthquakes or prolonged droughts, destroyed the agricultural and economic base of civilization. There is also speculation about internal conflicts where rivalries between city-states led to the collapse of the political system. All that remains of the Mycenaeans are their shaft graves and the majestic tombs of the Thracians, where kings were buried with gold masks and bronze weapons. These objects, found by archaeologists such as Heinrich Schliemann, reveal a society rich in culture obsessed with death and the afterlife. But they do not tell the whole story of its downfall. In the centuries that followed, the Mycenaean legacy was not entirely lost. Its stories were passed down orally, becoming the myths of the Trojan War, Agamemnon, and Ulysses. Although their cities were deserted, later Greeks remembered them as the homes of legendary heroes, ushering in a period of uncertainty and loss from which Greece would take centuries to recover. However, their disappearance also sowed the seeds of a cultural renaissance that would give the flourishing of classical Greece, a paradox that continues to fascinate historians and archaeologists. Perhaps we will never know exactly what led to the collapse of this brilliant civilization, but as we gaze upon the Cyclopean walls and golden treasures, we cannot help but marvel at the greatness of the Mycenaeans, a people whose shadow still looms over the ancient world in the southwestern corner of the Iberian Peninsula, between the Guadalquivir River and the Atlantic Ocean. It was said that there was a land rich in precious metals. An advanced culture. The Greeks and Romans called it Tartessos, a name whispered with awe and mystery. The city, or perhaps kingdom, was described as a place of untold riches where gold and silver flowed like rivers. But despite its fame, Tartessos disappeared, leaving behind only an echo in ancient records. The first mentions of Tartessos come from Greek texts. Herodotus spoke of a king named Argantonio, whose longevity and hospitality were legendary, according to the historian. The Tartessians traded with the Phoenicians, who introduced writing and other technologies to the region. The Greeks, amazed by the riches that arrived from the far west, imagined Tartessos as an almost mythical land comparable to Atlantis. The heart of Tartessos was surrounded by gold and silver mines that the inhabitants exploited with surprising skill for their time. Artifacts found in archaeological sites, such as the Carambolo, suggest a sophisticated culture with gold jewelry that rivaled the creations of the goldsmiths of the Eastern Mediterranean. However, Tartessos was not only about wealth. Its inhabitants developed a complex society with temples dedicated to local gods and a system of government that still baffles researchers. Over time, the trade that enriched Tartessos also attracted the attention of foreign powers. The Phoenicians established colonies on its coasts, such as Gator, and later the Carthaginians consolidated their influence. But at some point in the 6th century BC, Tartessos disappeared from historical records. Some suggest that it was destroyed by the Carthaginians, jealous of its wealth and power. Others believe that a change in trade patterns, perhaps due to the depletion of mineral resources, condemned the region to oblivion. The mystery of Tartessos has inspired centuries of speculation. Was it really an advanced kingdom, or simply a conglomerate of cities? Was it an Atlantean whose wealth attracted destruction, or a myth fueled by the imagination of merchants and explorers? What is certain is that Tartessos represents the meeting of worlds, the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, East and West, reality and legend. As new secrets are unearthed in the sands of Andalusia, Tartessos lives on in the minds of those who seek to understand the enigmas of the past. Perhaps one day, the ruins will emerge from the depths of time, revealing the truth behind this lost city that still shines like a golden dream on the horizon of ancient history in the heart of the Pacific, on one of the most remote islands on the planet. Already a mystery as deep as the waters that surround it, Easter Island, known for its enigmatic Moai statues, hold an even more perplexing secret: the Rongo Rongo writing carved on wooden tablets. This unique writing seems to speak of a lost time, an echo of a civilization that flourished and disappeared in complete isolation. The Rongo Rongo tablets were discovered by the first Europeans to arrive on the island. In the 18th century, the natives spoke of them with reverence, claiming that they contained the songs and stories of their ancestors. Each tablet is covered with writing that flows like a river of symbols, figures of humans, birds, fish, and geometric shapes that defy interpretation. No other known writing system resembles this enigma, and to this day, no one has deciphered its meaning. It is said that the wise men of the island, the Tangata Rongorongo, were the only ones capable of reading these inscriptions. These guardians of oral and written knowledge are said to have used the tablets to record genealogies and historical and religious events. However, when Rapa Nui society collapsed due to internal conflicts, diseases introduced by Europeans, and ecological devastation, these wise men disappeared, taking with them the keys to the Rongo Rongo. Modern archaeologists and linguists have been trying to decipher the tablets for over a century. Some believe they contain a syllabic writing system, while others suggest they could be techniques to help speakers remember long narratives. However, without a Rosetta Stone to provide linguistic equivalents, the mystery persists. The symbols remain a puzzle, a closed window into the soul of a culture that can no longer speak for itself. Rongo Rongo writing is closely linked to the island's creation myths. According to oral tradition, The first settlers arrived, guided by King Jumittua, bringing with them sacred knowledge. That was recorded on the tablets. These inscriptions not only had a practical purpose, but also a spiritual one, connecting the inhabitants with the gods and natural forces that govern their lives. The discovery of the tablets raises fascinating questions. How did such an isolated society develop such a complex writing system? What relationship could it have with other cultures in the Pacific or even more distant regions? Some researchers have suggested unlikely connections with the ancient writings of South America, but these theories lack solid evidence. In the shadows of an island that seems to float between reality and myth, the Rongo tablets wait patiently for someone to decipher their secret. Perhaps when this happens, not only will the words of a lost people be revealed, but also a completely new vision of the ancient world written in a language that connects humans with the mysteries of the cosmos at the edge of the known world, where the Mediterranean Sea meets the vast Atlantic Ocean, stood the legendary Pillars of Hercules. This pair of rock formations, identified with the Rock of Gibraltar to the north and Mount Hacho, or Jebel Musa to the south, marked for the ancients the end of the earth and the beginning of the unknown. They were the ultimate frontier, a place steeped in symbolism and fear that separated the civilized from the wild, according to Greek mythology. The pillars here erected by Hercules during one of his 12 labors in his search for the golden apples of the Garden of the Hesperides. The hero had to cross the mountains connecting Europe and Africa. Instead of going around them, he used his divine strength to separate them, opening a passage that allowed the flow between the sea and the ocean. These pillars not only represented his power, but also his challenge to the natural barriers of the world. The Phoenician sailors, masters of maritime trade, were the first to venture beyond the Pillars of Hercules. For them, these formations were not only a geographical boundary, but also a gateway to new riches. Legends said that beyond them lay islands full of treasures and fertile lands. However, crossing this threshold was seen as an act of bravery, as the gods could punish the intrepid with storms and shipwrecks. Over time, the Romans inherited these stories and expanded them. The Pillars of Hercules appeared on coins, maps, and writings as symbols of the reach of Roman power, an affirmation that even the ends of the world were under their influence. However, they also served as a warning that the Roman Empire was not a world without limits, a claim that even the ends of the world were under their influence. However, they also served as a reminder of human humility in the face of the immensity of the cosmos, a warning against hubris, the pride that offends the gods. The legends surrounding the pillars were not limited to the Mediterranean. Arab and medieval explorers spoke of lands beyond, some real, such as the Canary Islands, and others mythical, such as the island of Sambarondin. The Pillars of Hercules became a flexible concept, adapting to different cultures and eras, but always retaining their aura of mystery. In the age of great exploration, the Pillars of Hercules took on a new meaning. Christopher Columbus, setting sail into the unknown in 1492, crossed this threshold, carrying with him the hope of opening a new chapter in human history. The Latin inscription on the columns of the Spanish coat of arms, plus ultra, further beyond, reflects this spirit, an echo of the ambitions and fears that have accompanied humans since time immemorial. At sunset, when the sun bathes the Strait of Gibraltar in golden light, it is easy to imagine Hercules, with his superhuman strength separating the mountains and opening the way to infinity. And as the wind whispers among the rocks, ancient myths seem to come to life, reminding us that even in modern times, the Pillars of Hercules still hold secrets waiting to be unraveled. The Egyptian horizon had never seen anything as disconcerting as the reign of Akhenaten in a land that had worshipped a pantheon of gods for millennia. This pharaoh decided to challenge the established order by raising a single pillar to the sky. Gods for millennia, this pharaoh decided to challenge the established order by elevating a single god, Aten, as the only one worthy of worship. It was an act that shook the religious and political foundations of Egypt, creating a revolution that even centuries later is still the subject of amazement and debate. When he ascended the throne as Amenhotep IV, his reign seemed to continue the traditions of his predecessors. However, shortly thereafter, he adopted the name Akhenaten, he who is useful to Aten, signaling the radical change that was to come. Temples dedicated to Ammonius and other gods began to close their doors, while the sunlight of Aten flooded the newly built altars. Akhenaten not only transformed religion, but also founded a new capital, Akhetaten, located on the horizon of Aten. The city was a testament to his devotion to the sun god. Scenes from everyday life were engraved on its walls, depicting Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti worshipping Aten under rays that ended in hands delivering the symbol of life. It was a completely different vision of what Egypt had ever known, but not everyone in Egypt accepted this change. The priests of Ammonius, who had been a powerful force for generations, saw their privileges reduced and their temples desecrated. The traditional elites found themselves marginalized, and the people, accustomed to seeking protection from multiple gods, were bewildered by this new doctrine. The figure of Akhenaten was also peculiar. His artistic representations showed him with stylized features, a long neck, wide hips, and thin limbs. Some believe that these images were symbolic, representing his connection to the divine, while others suggest that he may have had some medical condition. Whatever the truth, these images only added to the mystery surrounding him. The end of Akhenaten's reign was as controversial as its beginning. Egypt's prosperity began to falter due to the concentration of resources in Akhenaten and tensions with neighboring territories. After his death, his name was systematically removed from official records, and Egypt returned to its old religious traditions under the reign of Tutankhamun. Modern archaeologists have found fragments of his city and his beliefs in the Amarna oasis. The inscriptions reveal an almost poetic fervor for Akhenaten, while the remains of temples tell the story of a pharaoh who tried to lead his people into a new era. However, his revolution was short-lived, and by centuries of rejection, Akhenaten remains a polarizing figure. Some see him as a visionary ahead of his time, a precursor of monotheism. Others consider him a heretic who endangered the stability of Egypt. Regardless of perspective, his story continues to illuminate the past with the intensity of the rays of Aten, challenging our understanding of antiquity. In the vast expanses of the Rub al-Khali Desert on the Arabian Peninsula lies a legend that tells of the wealth and fall of a lost city known as Ubar, also called Iram of the. According to ancient Islamic texts and travelers' accounts, this city was a center of trade and power built by a people known for defying the gods and their wrath. The story of Ubar begins with the people of Had, a tribe mentioned in the Quran as possessing great architectural skills and a deep sense of pride. They built a magnificent city with tall columns that seemed to touch the sky, a symbol of their ambition and arrogance. Ubar was an oasis of wealth located on the incense route, where camel caravans laden with myrrh and spices passed through to trade. However, Ubar's prosperity was not without divine warnings. Accounts claim that the inhabitants became corrupt and defied divine laws, disregarding the messages sent by the prophet Judah. In response, a cataclysm was unleashed upon the city. Some say it was an earthquake, while others speak of a sandstorm that buried it completely. Boraz was considered a myth, a story intended to teach the fragility of humanity in the face of divine power. However, at the end of the 20th century, explorers and archaeologists began to search for physical evidence of its existence. Using satellite images, they identified ancient roads that converged on a specific location in the desert, leading to the discovery of a settlement that matched the descriptions of Ubar. The remains found at the site included deep wells and stone structures that suggested a prosperous oasis. However, the findings also showed signs of collapse, possibly caused by overexploitation of water resources, which could have precipitated its disappearance. Archaeologists still debate whether this place is really Ubar or simply another important settlement on the incense route. Despite the discoveries, the mystery of Ubar lives on. The lost city continues to evoke images of caravans under a scorching sun, columns rising on the horizon, and of a storm that swallows everything in its path. It is a reminder of how ancient stories can be both warnings and inspirations, teaching us to respect the delicate harmony between humanity and its environment. On starry desert nights, when the wind blows over the dunes, some say you can still hear the dry columns of Ubar echoing in the imagination of those who seek the buried secrets of antiquity. Thus, the lost city remains alive in stories, challenging those who attempt to separate myth from reality in the heart of Asia Minor. Separate myth from reality in the heart of Asia Minor. The city of Troy stood as an impregnable fortress. Its haughty and sturdy walls were a testament to the architectural skill of its people and the cunning of its leaders. The tales of ancient Troy spoke of a unique defensive system designed not only to protect its inhabitants, but also to withstand the onslaught of the most powerful forces of the time. However, even the most formidable defenses have their weak points, as would be demonstrated by the legendary war that pitted the Greeks against the Trojans. Walls of Troy were not simple structures. They were a network of limestone and brick that reached prodigious heights, covering kilometers around the city. From their watchtowers, soldiers could spot enemies from miles away, giving Troy a crucial strategic advantage. The main gates, designed with narrow, easily defensible passageways, became bottlenecks for any attacker in times of these walls were a symbol of pride in times of war, an impenetrable barrier. Inside the walls, Troy was also protected by a complex network of tunnels and underground storerooms. These constructions not only ensured the supply of water and food during long sieges, but also provided escape routes for its inhabitants. The city was prepared to hold out for months, even years, which made Troy a nightmare for any invading army. But the Trojans did not count. The tenacity of the Greeks and their determination to take the city. The Greeks, led by Agamemnon, deployed all their military strategies against Troy, but every attempt to breach its walls ended in failure. Years of fighting passed without progress, with both sides suffering devastating losses. But Greek stubbornness did not stop there. Through the cunning of Odysseus, a plan was devised that would not attack the walls directly, but would use psychology and symbolism to penetrate. The heart of the city, the construction of the wooden horse, marked an unexpected turn in the war. The Greeks feigned a retreat, leaving the enormous artifact as an offering to the gods. Inside the horse, the most skilled warriors hid, waiting patiently for the moment to attack. The Trojans, confident in their victory, opened their gates and brought the horse into the city, unaware that it would be the instrument of their ruin. That night, while the Trojans celebrated, the Greek soldiers emerged from the horse, opened the city gates, and allowed the Greek army to enter. What followed was a devastating looting that ended with the destruction of Troy. The very walls that had protected the city for generations were reduced to rubble. The proud and brave Trojan resistance was finally overcome, not by force but by cunning. The remains of Troy still echo with that tragedy. Its ruins, unearthed by archaeologists, tell the story of a city that, despite its greatness, succumbed to human ingenuity. It is a reminder of how even the most imposing fortresses can fall when faced with the creativity and persistence of their enemies. In the vast expanse of the Mediterranean, where waves caress the coasts of multiple civilizations, a small but ambitious nation stood out for its skill at sea. The Phoenicians, undisputed masters of navigation, not only conquered the waters, but also wove a network of trade and influence that reached distant corners unknown to other ancient cultures. Their naval technology was not only advanced, but also a manifestation of their ingenuity and ability to adapt to the challenges of the sea. Phoenician ships were marvels of maritime engineering, from the agile commercial vessels designed to transport large quantities of goods to the sturdy war galleys. Each ship was built with precision. The Phoenicians used resistant wood such as cedar, which was abundant in their lands and offered durability and flexibility. They also employed advanced construction techniques such as mortise and tenon joints, which made their ships more stable and reliable in rough waters. One of the keys to their success was the invention of the keel, a structure that provided stability to the vessels and allowed them to navigate more safely in adverse conditions. This revolutionary design, combined with triangular sails and perfectly synchronized oars, gave them an advantage over their competitors. Perfectly synchronized gave them a significant advantage over their competitors. The Phoenicians were also experts in using the stars for navigation, a skill that allowed them to explore distant and unknown territories from their main ports in Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos. The Phoenicians launched commercial expeditions that reached the coasts of Egypt, Greece, Italy, and North Africa. They established colonies in strategic locations such as Carthage, which would become an important center of power. Their trade not only included material goods such as glass, wood, and metals, but also ideas and knowledge that would influence the cultures with which they came into contact. The Phoenicians also explored beyond the Mediterranean, reaching the British Isles in search of tin, a metal crucial for the manufacture of bronze. It is even speculated that they may have sailed around the African continent, an impressive feat for their time. Their achievements at sea not only reflect their technical prowess, but also their courage and curiosity about the unknown. However, their maritime dominance was not without challenges. Pirates, storms, and rivalries with other naval powers tested their ability to maintain their supremacy. Despite these obstacles, the Phoenicians adapted and continued to expand their influence, leaving a legacy that still resonates in the history of navigation. Phoenician naval technology is a testament to how a civilization can overcome its geographical limitations and establish itself as a global power through ingenuity and determination. Their ships, which once sailed the seas with audacity, now rest only in the tales of history, but their spirit of exploration lives on in every journey we take into the unknown. In the depths of dark temples, where daylight barely touched the walls covered with inscriptions, the followers of Mithras gathered in secret. This god, whose origins date back to ancient Persia, had found a special place in the heart of the Roman world. In an empire full of gods and traditions, Mithras stood out not for his military power or his association with politics, but for the almost mystical devotion his followers gave him. The cult of Mithras was shrouded in mystery. Only the initiated could participate in its rituals, which were performed in artificial caves known as Mithraea. These structures, carefully constructed to resemble caves, symbolized the womb of the earth, a place of rebirth and connection with the cosmos. The center of these sacred spaces was always a representation of Mithras killing a bull, an image known as tauroctony. Tauroctony was much more than a simple scene from home. The initiates saw in it a complex symbol of sacrifice, fertility, and renewal. Mithras, by spilling the blood of the bull, brought life to the world. The stars that adorned the night sky were, according to the Mithraists, linked to this sacred act, establishing Mithras as a mediator between the cosmos and humanity. Each ceremony was a reflection of this divine connection, an attempt to align men with the celestial order. The initiation process into the cult was long and demanding. New adepts went through 7 levels of ascension, each associated with a planet and a specific virtue. From the lowest degree, the raven, to the highest, the father, the initiates were spiritually transformed, leaving behind their worldly identities to embrace a higher purpose. These ceremonies included tests of endurance, fasting, and participation in symbolic banquets. The cult of Mithras was especially popular among Roman soldiers. Its emphasis on discipline, sacrifice, and brotherhood resonated deeply with the ranks of the army. Soldiers who faced death constantly found comfort in the promise of immortality and rebirth that the cult offered. Mithraic temples multiplied along the borders of the empire, from Britain to Syria, uniting men under a common faith. However, the cult was not without conflict. As Christianity began to gain ground, tensions arose between the two religions. The parallels between Mithras and Christ, especially on issues such as birth in a cave and salvation through sacrifice, led to heated theological debates. Over time, Christianity established itself as the predominant religion, relegating the cult of Mithras to the shadows of history. In the region of Brittany in northwestern France, an unusual landscape stretches out. Like an eternal enigma, thousands of menhirs, vertical stones of varying sizes, stand in seemingly endless alignments. These ancient monoliths, known as the Karnak menhirs, have defied human understanding for centuries. Who placed them there? Why do they do it? These questions, like the stones themselves, remain frozen in time. Legend has it that the menhirs were soldiers petrified by Merlin, the wizard of Arthurian legend, while they were pursuing their enemies while chasing his enemies. Although this tale is steeped in fantasy, the real reasons behind these structures are just as fascinating. Archaeologists have determined that the menhirs were erected more than 5,000 years ago during the Neolithic period, but their exact function remains a mystery. Some believe that the Karnak menhirs were part of a complex astronomical system. The precise alignments of the stones suggest that they may have been used to observe the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Each stone, with its specific position and orientation, could have been a tool for measuring time by marking the solstices and equinoxes. If this is true, Karnak would have been a center of astronomical knowledge long before the construction of Stonehenge. Others suggest that the menhirs had a ritual purpose. The ancient communities that erected them may have considered them points of connection between the earth and the sky. The stones, being so tall and deeply buried, symbolized a union between the earthly world and the divine. The rituals performed around them would have sought to ensure abundant harvests, protection, and prosperity for the community. The size and arrangement of the menhirs also point to a social use. Some researchers believe that the alignments reflected a hierarchy, with the largest stones representing leaders or important figures in the community. The ceremonies around the menhirs would have been moments of unity in which the tribe reaffirmed its collective identity and their connection to their ancestors. However, the creation of this monumental complex raises even more questions. How did these Neolithic communities manage to move and erect stones weighing several tons without the advanced tools we know today? The techniques used remain a subject of debate, but the dedication and collective effort required to build Karnak are undeniable. This place is a testament to the ingenuity and willpower of our ancestors. Karnak has also been the subject of more speculative theories. Some believe that the menhirs are points of terrestrial energy aligned with ley lines connecting sacred sites around the world. Others, less conventional, suggest that the stones were placed by extraterrestrial visitors, leaving Karnak as an enigmatic marker of an intergalactic encounter on the misty Scandinavian coast. Where the north winds whispered secrets among the pines, the Vikings sought symbols that seemed to contain the very essence of the universe. The runes carved into stone, wood, and bone were not mere letters to them. Each stroke had a deep meaning, a connection to the gods and the invisible forces that ruled the world. According to the sagas, these mysterious marks were given to humans by Odin, the supreme god, after he hung for 9 days and nights from the tree Yggdrasil, sacrificing himself to obtain his wisdom. The runes, organized into a system known as feudor, they not only served as a means of communication, but also as ritual tools. The Vikings used them to record epic stories, mark territories, and above all, perform acts of magic. It was said that runes could heal wounds, guarantee victory in battle, or even curse enemies. Each symbol had a name, a sound, and an associated power, and only the wisest, such as the goats, priests, were able to unravel all their secrets. One winter night, a blacksmith named Bjorn found a stone engraved with runes in the frozen bed of a river. Examining it under the flickering light of his forge, he saw that it contained the symbol of Algis, the rune of protection. Unaware that his discovery would change his life, Bjorn kept the stone in his belt. From then on, every blow of his hammer resonated with supernatural force, and the weapons he forged were coveted by warriors throughout Scandinavia. Some believe that the rune had invoked the blessing of Thor, the god of thunder. But not all runes brought good fortune. Legends tell of the Hagalaz rune, associated with destruction and chaos. A sailor named Eric carved this rune on the prow of his drakkar before setting sail for distant lands, believing it would give him the power to rule the seas. However, in a furious storm, his ship was swallowed by monstrous waves, and the rune became his doom. The survivors of the crew said that they had heard evil laughter amid the roar of the wind. Runes also played a central role in divination rituals. Seers, threw small pieces of wood or bone engraved with runes and read the patterns in which they fell. Each arrangement told a story, an omen of prosperity, a warning of danger, or a path to be taken. For the Vikings, destiny was not fixed, but runes could reveal its contours and help them face it. As Christianity spread across northern Europe, the use of runes began to decline. Christian priests condemned the practices associated with them, calling them heresy. Many runes were destroyed, and knowledge of their magical use was lost in the mists of time. However, the Nordic peoples continued to use them in more mundane contexts, such as inscriptions on gravestones and monuments. In the depths of the jungles, in the sands of the deserts, and on the sacred mountains of the ancient world, civilizations left clues about a shared mystical concept, the third eye. This symbol represented in friezes, statues, and manuscripts seemed to indicate an invisible organ, a gateway to spiritual perception. In India, it was linked to the Ajna chakra, the center of intuition and wisdom. In Egypt, it was associated with the Eye of Horus, an emblem of protection and power. But was it just a symbol, or did the ancients know of a higher state of perception that we have forgotten? In the Vedic texts of India, sages wrote about the third eye as a tool for transcending the material plane. Yogis devoted years of meditation to open this eye, achieving visions of other worlds and understanding universal truths. According to the stories, those who managed to activate this energy center could read thoughts, see future events, and understand the mysteries of the cosmos. On one occasion, a young man named Arjun, after years of practice, described seeing a cosmic lotus that contained the destiny of all living souls. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, the Eye of Horus had both spiritual and practical significance. Priests used it in protective rituals, and the pharaohs wore it as an amulet, believing it gave them vision beyond the veil of death. The architects who designed the pyramids incorporated proportions based on this symbol, convinced that the vibrations of the cosmos would resonate in their creations. In mythology, the restored Eye of Horus was a symbol of renewal and balance, a reminder that even chaos can be transformed into order. Some cultures believed that the third eye was more than a spiritual concept, but a physical part of the human body. The Babylonians and Mayans spoke of a point of light on the forehead that, when activated, allowed shamans to communicate with the gods. The Mayans, in particular, performed ceremonies that involved inhaling smoke from sacred plants to open this door of perception. The shamans returned from these trances with messages about rain, the harvest, and the cycles of the stars. Knowledge of the third eye was not limited to Asia and Egypt in the north. The natives spoke of an inner vision, a state in which they could see the spirits of nature and their ancestors. In their ritual dances, they sought to connect with this invisible eye, ensuring balance between their people and the natural world. The stone circles they built were energy maps designed to stimulate this divine connection. Ancient chronicles spoke of a lost land in the far north, a place known as Thule. This name evoked visions of endless frozen seas, endless skies, and a sun that never set in summer but never rose in winter. Greek sailors led by Pythias of Massala recounted their voyages to this mythical corner of the world. Around 330 BC, according to their accounts, Thule was beyond civilization, at the edge of the known world, where the gods and the elements reigned unopposed. Pythias described his journey to Thule as an odyssey through a foggy and icy ocean. When the days began to grow longer than normal, he knew he was crossing the limits of what the Greeks knew as habitable. He finally arrived at a land covered in ice and inhabited by mysterious people who cultivated their fields under the strange glow of a sun that never set. According to Pythias, these people lived in communion with nature and worshipped gods who ruled the weather, the skies, and the harvests. In Thule, the sea turned into a gelatinous substance that prevented navigation. The natives called this phenomenon the frozen sea and considered it a sign that men should not venture further north. However, some daring explorers attempted to continue onward, only to disappear without a trace. These stories reinforce the idea that Thule was a threshold, a portal to the domain of the gods or to even more unknown worlds. Over the centuries, Thule became synonymous with the unattainable, the remote, and the divine. The Romans, fascinated by Pythias' tales, searched for this land on their own expeditions to the north, but they never managed to find definitive proof of its existence. Theories about its location range from the Faroe Islands to Iceland and even Norway. Every corner of the north seemed to echo with echoes of Thule, as if the earth itself resisted being discovered. With the arrival of the Middle Ages, Thule acquired an even greater aura of mystery. European maps marked it as a mythical island surrounded by sea monsters and shrouded in eternal fog. The monks who copied these maps spoke of Thule as a place where time stood still and where men could achieve divine wisdom if they managed to survive its trials. The Vikings, explorers par excellence, claimed to have seen Thule during their voyages to Greenland and North America. However, their accounts were contradictory. Some described an icy paradise full of natural resources, while others spoke of a desolate place inhabited by spirits that challenged the living. Despite their differences, they all agreed that Thule was a sacred place, a reflection of the cosmos on Earth. In the collective imagination, Thule remains a metaphor for the ends of the world, the place where logic ends and myth begins. Although modern maps have erased its name, its spirit lives on in every expedition into the unknown, in every attempt to discover what lies beyond the horizon. Because deep down we all carry a little bit of Thule in our souls, a longing to discover what has not yet been revealed. More than 3,000 years ago, a shadow fell over the great civilizations of the Mediterranean. Cities were burned to the ground, empires collapsed, and records were filled with lamentations for a mysterious enemy, the Sea Peoples. No one knew where they came from, only that they arrived like a storm, destroying everything in their path. Their ships, laden with ruthless warriors, sailed the seas like ghosts, and their attacks were so brutal that even Egypt, under the command of Ramses III, barely survived. The Sea People seemed to come out of nowhere, but their coordination and ferocity suggested an alliance come out of nowhere. But their coordination and ferocity suggested a well-organized alliance. It was said that they came from the Aegean Islands, or perhaps from beyond, expelled from their lands by natural disasters or internal conflicts. The Greeks called them pirates, but the Egyptians saw them as an apocalyptic force sent by the gods to punish humanity. In his chronicles, Ramses III described how the Sea Peoples attacked with unstoppable fury, first destroying the Cthulhu kingdoms, leaving ruins where one of the most powerful civilizations in the world had once flourished. Then they advanced towards Canaan and the Levant, destroying cities and enslaving their inhabitants. Finally, they headed for Egypt, where their ships darkened the waters of the Nile Delta. The pharaoh, aware of the threat, deployed his troops along the river, building fortresses and arming his people. The battle was fierce, with arrows crossing the sky like showers of fire and swords clashing in an echo of despair. Ramses III managed to repel the invaders, but at a high cost. The Egyptian cities were devastated, and the kingdom's economy was never the same again. The Sea Peoples brought not only destruction, but also an enigma. Records of their language, culture, and motivations are scarce, leading to centuries of speculation. Some believe they were allies of the Philistines, while others suggest they were a conglomerate of displaced tribes who banded together to survive. What is certain is that their attacks marked the beginning of the Dark Ages of the Mediterranean, a period in which writing disappeared and civilizations regressed into myth. In the myths that emerged afterwards, the Sea Peoples became almost supernatural figures, seen as agents of change, heralds of a new era that destroyed the old to make way for the new. Archaeologists have found remains of their weapons, ships, and temporary settlements, but they have not yet solved the enigma of who they really were. Were they a confederation of tribes that rebelled against their rulers, or a unified force with an unknown purpose? Each new discovery brings us closer to the truth oppressors, or a unified force with an unknown purpose. Each discovery raises more questions than answers. The mystery of the Sea Peoples remains one of the most fascinating enigmas of ancient history. They are a reminder of how even the greatest civilizations can fall to the unexpected, and how the darkest events can give rise to legends that endure for millennia, like the waves that brought them. The Sea Peoples have left their mark on history, disappearing over the horizon, but never forgotten. When the city of Carthage was razed to the ground by the Romans in 146 BC, its defeat seemed to spell the end of a civilization that had dominated the Western Mediterranean. Flames consumed the temples, markets, and homes of a city that had once rivaled Rome in power and ambition. According to legend, the fields surrounding the city were sown with salt so that it would never prosper again. But did Carthage really disappear, or did its spirit continue in unexpected ways? The survivors of the fall of Carthage fled in all directions. Some took refuge in rural areas of North Africa, keeping Carthaginian traditions alive in small communities. Others scattered across the Mediterranean, taking with them their knowledge of navigation, trade, and politics. It is said that some Carthaginian captains sailed into the Atlantic in search of new lands where they could rebuild their empire far from the shadow of Rome. Meanwhile, the Romans worked to erase all traces of Carthage. Libraries were looted and Carthaginian texts written in Punic were almost completely lost. However, fragments of their culture managed to survive. The Carthaginian religion, for example, with its rituals and deities, left a mark on the religious practices of the surrounding regions, even influencing some aspects of Roman culture. Despite the brutality of their defeat, the resilience of the Carthaginians became evident over time in the Roman provinces of Africa. The descendants of Carthage prospered as merchants and landowners. Their skills in agriculture transformed these regions into some of the most important granaries of the Roman Empire. Although the city of Carthage was rebuilt as a Roman colony, the Carthaginian spirit persisted in the hearts of its people. Over time, historians began to rediscover the greatness of Carthage. Archaeological excavations revealed the remains of an advanced civilization with technology and art that rivaled the greatest achievements of Greece and Rome. The myths that the Romans had created about the Carthaginians, such as the supposed sacrifice of children to the gods, were questioned, and the true history of Carthage began to emerge in the popular imagination. Carthage remains a city shrouded in mystery and tragedy. Its fall marked the end of an era, but it also left a legacy that resonates throughout the history of the Mediterranean. Modern explorers who sail the waters once ruled by the Carthaginians wonder if more evidence of their existence will ever surface. Existence. Where are the ships that ventured beyond the Strait of Gibraltar? What secrets remain to be discovered in the depths of the Mediterranean? The fate of the Carthaginians is a reminder of how civilizations can rise from the ashes, transformed but never completely forgotten. Their descendants in spirit, if not in name, helped shape the Roman world and, through it, the modern world. Carthage will never be rebuilt as it was, but its memory lives on in the hearts of those who honor its legacy. But its memory remains as a testimony to human resistance and ingenuity. High on a sacred mountain surrounded by cypresses and home oaks stood Delphi, the navel of the world according to the ancient Greeks. Here, the oracle of Apollo offered visions and advice that could change the course of kingdoms and civilizations. The temple, shrouded in an aura of mysticism, was visited by kings, generals, and common citizens, all in search of answers. But what lay behind the prophecies of Delphi? Were they true divine visions, or the result of a carefully manipulated natural phenomenon? The stories about Delphi begin with the arrival of Apollo, who killed the serpent Python to claim the sanctuary as his own. Since then, the priestesses known as Pythias spoke on behalf of the god, sitting on a tripod over a crack in the earth. According to the stories, they inhaled sacred vapors that emanated from the ground, allowing them to enter a trance and communicate the messages of Apollo. Visitors listened to these enigmatic and often ambiguous words and interpreted them as guidance for their decisions. The journey to Delphi was in itself a transformative experience. Pilgrims had to purify themselves at the Castalian spring and offer sacrifices before approaching the temple. The air was filled with incense, and the murmur of nearby springs seemed to whisper secrets from the beyond. Inside the temple, visitors found the image of Apollo and the priests who acted as mediators between mortals and the gods. However, modern studies suggest that the sacred vapors that influenced the priestesses may have had a scientific basis. Some researchers believe that the crack in the floor released gases such as ethylene, a compound known to induce trance states and hallucinations. If this is true, Delphi would be a fascinating example of how natural phenomena can be interpreted as divine intervention. Despite these theories, the Oracle of Delphi remains an enigma. Its prophecies, although often cryptic, they seem to have surprising accuracy. When Croesus, king of Lydia, asked if he should attack Persia, the oracle replied that he would destroy a great empire. Croesus interpreted this as a sign of victory, but he soon discovered that the empire destroyed would be his own. The power of the oracle lay not only in its words, but in the faith it inspired. For the ancient Greeks, Delphi was not just a physical place, but a point of connection between the human and divine worlds. Its prophecies shaped politics, war, and culture, leaving a legacy that lives on in the collective imagination. The Oracle of Delphi remains a symbol of mystery and faith, a place where history and myth intertwine. Its enigmas invite us to reflect on the power of human beliefs and how interpretations of the natural world can transcend the earthly to touch the divine. In the end, perhaps the greatest secret of Delphi is not whether its prophecies were true, but how they managed to capture the imagination of entire generations. In the bustling markets of the Middle East, among silks and spices, there was an object that captured the attention of merchants and warriors alike: the Damascus steel blade. Its wavy surface, with patterns evoking moving waves, was not only beautiful, but also hid a secret that had puzzled generations. These swords were not only durable, they were also incredibly sharp, capable of cutting through armor and other swords with ease. How was this marvel of metallurgy created? The story begins in the forges of Damascus, a vibrant city on the Silk Road where blacksmiths dedicated their lives to perfecting the art of sword making. They used a material called watts, a high-carbon steel from India. This material was melted and forged with precise techniques, while mysterious elements were added to improve its strength and flexibility. Some said that the blacksmiths knew alchemical secrets, while others believed that the process was a gift from the gods. The technique passed down from master to apprentice was so complex that even the most experienced blacksmiths could not always reproduce it. It was said that the fire had to burn at an exact temperature and that the carefully selected ingredients had to be mixed at a specific moment. While the blacksmiths worked, they sang prayers and performed rituals, convinced that divine blessings influenced the result. Legends about Damascus, swords of Damascus, spread rapidly. European crusaders fighting Muslims were surprised to see their swords break against these indestructible blades. Many tried to copy the design, but failed. Even in more recent times, scientists who studied fragments of these swords were fascinated by their unique composition, which included carbon nanotubes, something medieval blacksmiths could not have known about consciously. Over time, the technique was lost, possibly due to the interruption of the trade in woods or a lack of transmission of knowledge. Today, Damascus steel swords are prized relics, not only for their functionality, but also for their beauty and mystery. Modern attempts to recreate them have resulted in replicas, but none equal the originals. The mastery of the originals lies at the heart of these swords, raising a fundamental question. Was their invention a stroke of genius or the result of centuries of trial and error? The blacksmiths of Damascus did not leave detailed records of their methods, which adds an aura of magic to their legacy. The swords were not just weapons. They were symbols of status, power, and human skill, objects that connected the earthly with the transcendental. Damascus steel, though shrouded in mystery, reminds us that even ancient civilizations had knowledge that defied their time. These swords, with their hypnotic patterns and unmatched quality, remain a testament to what humans can achieve when they combine art, science, and spirit. On the coast of the Gulf of Corinth in ancient Greece was a prosperous city dedicated to the worship of Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes, with majestic temples, bustling markets, and streets full of life. Elik was a center of commerce and religion, but one fateful night, the earth shook, the sea roared, and the city disappeared, swallowed by the waters in what many described as divine punishment. The myth of Elik begins with its arrogance. According to the stories, the citizens of Elysai offended Poseidon by denying his protection to some travelers seeking refuge. Enraged, the god decided to punish the city. Ancient records describe how a strong earthquake shook the region, followed by a huge wave that swept away everything in its path. At dawn, Heli had disappeared, leaving only silence and a calm sea. For centuries, local fishermen spoke of the submerged ruins visible under the crystal-clear waters on clear days. Ancient writers such as Strabo and Pausanias recounted how Heli was swallowed by the gulf, becoming a warning to those who would defy the gods. But over time, the exact location of the city was lost, and Heli became a legend, a symbol of human fragility in the face of the forces of nature. The modern search for Heli began in the 19th century when archaeologists and explorers attempted to locate the lost city. Some believed it was submerged in the Gulf, while others suggested that the ruins could be buried under layers of sediment on the mainland. Finally, in the 1990s, a team of archaeologists discovered the remains of ancient structures near the coast, confirming that Eek had existed and that its disappearance was real. Excavations revealed not only architectural ruins, but also artifacts that offered a glimpse of life in Eek before the disaster. Ceramic coins and statues of the god Poseidon suggest that the city was an important religious center. However, the discovery also raised new questions. Was the flooding caused only by an earthquake and a tsunami, or were there other factors at play? Heli is not just a story of destruction. It is also a reminder of the complex relationship between humans and nature. The ancient Greeks saw natural disasters as expressions of divine will, and the fall of Heli reinforced their belief in the need to honor the gods. For us, the story of Heli is a lesson about the importance of respecting the environment and preparing for the unexpected. Heli, with its tragic fate and its eternal legacy, teaches us that even in destruction, there is beauty and meaning. Each fragment discovered not only reconstructs a city, but also a narrative that connects the present with the past, reminding us of the eternal dance between humans, the gods, and nature in the golden sands of the desert. Under the burning sky of Sinai, a group of men advanced with a burden that was heavy not only because of its construction, but also because of its divine significance. The Ark of the Covenant, covered in gleaming gold, was flanked by cherubim with outstretched wings and contained the stone tablets that Moses had received. At the top of the mountain, this object, according to the scriptures, was not only a symbol of the covenant between God and the people of Israel, but also a source of immense power capable of defeating armies and tearing down walls. The ark, placed in the sanctuary of the tabernacle, was treated with fearful reverence. Only authorized priests could approach it, and its transfer required a rigorous protocol. Stories tell that those who touched it without permission suffered immediate divine punishment, ranging from illness to death. In every battle, the Israelites carried it to the front, trusting that its power would guarantee victory. And so, it was until the ark mysteriously disappeared, leaving a void in the hearts of its people. Theories about the fate of the ark are as numerous as they are fascinating. Some believe that it was taken to Babylon after the fall of Jerusalem, while others suggest that it was hidden in a secret place by the priests to protect it from invaders. It is even said that the ark rests in the Church of St. Mary of Zion in Ethiopia, guarded by monks who have sworn never to abandon it. Each theory is shrouded in mystery and contradictions, fueling the obsession of archaeologists and adventurers throughout the centuries. Expeditions dedicated to finding the Ark have emerged from the vast libraries of the Templars to the secret archives of the Vatican. Countless seekers have attempted follow the clues that lead to the lost object. However, the trail always goes cold, as if the Ark were destined to remain hidden, more a myth than a tangible reality. The impact of the Ark transcends its physical existence. It represents the relationship between the human and the divine, between the mortal and the eternal. Its symbolism has been used to justify wars, cement alliances, and fuel the faith of generations. For some, its disappearance is a reminder of the fragility of the sacred in human hands. For others, it is proof that the divine cannot be possessed or controlled. Ancient texts mention that the ark was capable of emitting a reaping light, a manifestation of God's power. This has led to modern speculation about its possible connection to advanced or even extraterrestrial technologies. Some imagine that it could have been an energy device designed by a more advanced civilization and misinterpreted by the ancients as a sacred artifact, however. Most theories and legends. The Ark of the Covenant remains a powerful symbol of faith and mystery in every corner of the world. Its story resonates with the hope that one day it will be found, revealing secrets that could change our understanding of history and the divine. Until then, the Ark remains one of humanity's greatest mysteries. Every night, as seekers of the Ark gaze at the starry sky, they wonder if the object they so desperately seek is buried beneath the same sand that once bore witness to its splendor. The Ark of the Covenant is not just a lost artifact. It is a promise, an echo of the sacred. Witness to its splendor. The Ark of the Covenant is not just a lost artifact. It is a promise, an echo of the sacred that still whispers in the hearts of those who seek the eternal. In the hills near Athens, in a valley shrouded in mist, stood a sanctuary that for 1,000 years was the center of one of the most mysterious rites of the ancient world, the mysteries of Usus. Only a select few, after a rigorous initiation process, were allowed to participate in this secret ritual that promised to reveal the secrets of life, death, and regeneration. What happened behind the walls of the sanctuary is shrouded in sacred silence, protected by oaths that no initiate dared to break. The ritual was dedicated to Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, and her daughter Persephone, who, according to mythology, was kidnapped by Hades to become queen of the underworld. The mysteries narrated this myth as an allegory of life and death. Persephone symbolized the seed that disappears underground to be reborn as a new plant, while Demeter represented the eternal cycle of nature and the hope of life beyond death. The road to Eleusis began with a procession from Athens in which the initiates walked barefoot, carrying torches and singing hymns to the goddesses. Along the way, they faced trials that symbolized the difficulties of human existence. Upon arriving at the sanctuary, they purified themselves in the river and were led to the Tell, a huge hall where the most secret ceremonies were held. Inside the telesterion, the lights were turned off and the participants were plunged into darkness. According to the fragmentary accounts that have come down to us, at that moment, they were shown a sacred object known as the Erethy, which revealed the very essence of existence. Some believe that it was an ear of wheat, a symbol of fertility and rebirth, while others suggest that it may have been a hallucinogenic drink prepared with herbs that induced mystical visions caused mystical visions. Upon leaving the sanctuary, the initiates claimed to have experienced a spiritual transformation. Many claimed that they no longer feared death, convinced that life was only one stage in an eternal cycle. This knowledge not only offered personal comfort, but also reinforced social cohesion by uniting participants in a shared experience of transcendence. The mysteries of Eleusis survived for more than a millennium, adapting to the political and cultural changes of Greece, even when the Roman Empire adopted Christianity. The rites continued in secret until they were finally banned in the 6th century AD by Emperor Theodosius. With their disappearance, one of the greatest spiritual treasures of antiquity was lost. The mysteries of Eleusis not only celebrated the cycle of life and death, they also reminded humans of their place in the universe as beings capable of transcending their mortality and connecting with the divine. And although silence has shrouded these rituals for centuries, their message continues to resonate in the darkness. There is always a glimmer of hope on the infinite horizon of the desert, where the wind plays with the grains of sand and time seems to have stopped. The Sphinx of Giza emerges as a timeless figure, its lion's body and human face seeming to guard the secrets of the past, a silent witness to the glorious days of ancient Egypt. At dawn, when the first rays of the sun gilded the limestone, the priests bowed in reverence, considering the Sphinx not only a work of art, but an incarnation of divine power and protection. Legend has it that the Sphinx was carved during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre around 20,000 BC to guard his pyramid and symbolize his connection with the gods. However, some scholars suggest that it could be much older, dating back to an earlier civilization whose existence has been buried under the sands. The marks on its body, eroded by time and wind, seem to whisper stories of torrential rains dating back to a time before pharaonic Egypt itself. Its face, although damaged by centuries of erosion and vandalism, it still retains an enigmatic expression. Some believe that it represents Khephren himself, while others argue that it could be the image of a sun god. Beneath that fixed gaze, a message seems to be hidden, an enigma that challenges those who dare to contemplate it with modern eyes. Was it simply a symbol of earthly power or a beacon to communicate with the divine? Over the centuries, the Sphinx remained partially buried under the sand, as if nature itself. Nature wanted to protect it from oblivion. During the New Kingdom, Pharaoh Thutmose IV ordered its excavation after dreaming that the Sphinx promised him the throne if he freed it from its sandy prison. This event gave rise to the famous Dream Stele, which recounts how the majesty of the past still had influence over the kings of the present. Modern excavations have revealed passageways and chambers beneath the Sphinx, which has led to speculation about hidden treasures or lost knowledge. However, these tunnels, many of them natural, have not provided clear answers. The Sphinx remains a mystery, a work that seems to have been designed not to be understood, but to inspire eternal wonder. In ancient accounts, the Sphinx was associated with Ra, the sun god, as guardian of the horizon. During solar rituals, its position facing the sunrise reinforced the connection between the pharaohs and the celestial gods. Priests believed that its power could protect the kingdom from visible and invisible enemies, and its presence gave a sacred aura to the Giza funerary complex. While science attempts to unravel its secrets, the Sphinx of Giza remains a reminder of the mystery inherent in the past. In its silence, it holds the answers to questions that may never be answered, and thus it remains the sentinel of Egypt, motionless in its eternal vigil over the vast plains of Egypt before the majestic pyramids dominated the landscape. The mastabas stood as silent guardians of the dead. These rectangular structures made of adobe or limestone were the first monumental tombs intended for royalty and nobility. Under the scorching desert sun, workers carefully shaped blocks, aware that they were building eternal homes for the spirits of their masters. The mastaba, with its simple and robust shape, contained a deep shaft leading to a sealed burial chamber. In this chamber, the deceased was placed with their most precious belongings, from jewelry to food. Everything was arranged to ensure their comfort in the afterlife. The walls of the mastabas were adorned with inscriptions and reliefs that narrated the life of the deceased and their desire for immortality. During the reign of Djoser, the first pharaoh of the Third Dynasty, a visionary architect named Imhotep transformed the humble mastaba into something extraordinary. He stacked mastabas on top of each other, creating the first step pyramid in Saqqara. This structure that rose like a stairway to the sky represented a symbolic bridge between Earth and the gods. Its revolutionary design marked the beginning of a new era in funerary architecture. The transition from mastabas to pyramids was not an immediate process. It required decades of experimentation and refinement. The first pyramids, such as that of Mayum, suffered partial collapses, but each mistake led to progress. Finally, under the reign of Snefru, the technique was perfected, giving rise to the first pyramid with smooth faces in Dashur, known as the Red Pyramid. Each block placed was a tribute to the pharaoh and an offering to the gods. The workers, many of whom were peasants during the Nile flood season, saw their work not only as a duty, but as an act of devotion. It was believed that by participating in the construction of these structures, they ensured their own connection with eternity. With the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza during the reign of Khufu, the techniques reached their peak. This colossal structure, composed of more than 2 million stone blocks, stood as the center of a funerary complex that included temples, causeways, and satellite pyramids. It represented not only the power of the pharaoh, but also the culmination of centuries of architectural evolution. Although overshadowed by the pyramids, the mastabas never disappeared completely. They continued to be used by nobles and high officials who sought to replicate the magnificence of the royal tombs on a smaller scale. Their reliefs and texts narrated stories of life, death, and hope, reminding those who visited them that even in eternity, the past was still alive. The mastabas and pyramids remain silent witnesses to the ambition and devotion of ancient Egypt. Their forms intertwine the simplicity of the beginnings and the grandeur of dreams, a legacy that continues to fascinate those who seek to understand the mysteries of the past. Under the starry sky, these structures whisper stories of a civilization that never ceased to aspire to immortality. In the deep forests and misty hills of Europe, they moved like a force of nature. Their vibrant culture was marked by wise druids, indomitable warriors, and an almost mystical connection to the earth. In the clearings of the forest, around crackling bonfires, the druids traced enigmatic symbols in the air, communicating with invisible gods and predicting destinies. Their villages, built of wood and straw, were centers of community life, filled off songs and epic tales. The Celts were not a unified people, but a network of interconnected tribes that stretched from Ireland to Anatolia. In every corner of their vast territory, the Celtic language flowed like a river, carrying with it songs, myths, and secrets. However, this dispersion also made them vulnerable. The Roman legions, with their superior organization and weaponry, began to press on their borders, forcing the Celts to defend not only their land, but their way of life. In the year 390 BC, the Celts achieved an unexpected triumph by sacking Rome, leaving an indelible mark on the memory of the nascent empire. But this victory was short-lived. Over time, Roman tactics and determination began to tip the balance. Tribe after tribe was absorbed, their lands conquered, and their traditions assimilated or repressed. The Druids, guardians of Celtic knowledge and traditions, were persecuted to the point of extinction. As the legions advanced, the Celts began to retreat to the British Isles and the remotest corners of Europe. In these lands, their culture resisted, slowly transforming under Roman influence. Ancient Druidic rituals blended with Roman religious practices, while circular stone fortresses began to merge with expanding Roman cities. The arrival of Christianity marked another turning point. The new religion brought with it writing, and some Celtic myths began to be recorded by monks. However, the spiritual essence of the Celts, deeply rooted in nature, and its cycles began to fade in the face of Christian teachings. Their gods were relegated to the status of myths, and their sacred ceremonies transformed into popular traditions. Traces of the Celts still echo in the Samhain festivals, the origin of Halloween, and in the intricate crafts that survive in the lands where they once thrived. Their languages, although fragmented, still persist in forms such as Welsh, Gaelic, and Breton, but the questions remain, what else have we lost with their disappearance? What secrets might the Druids have revealed to us if they had not been silenced in stone circles such as Stonehenge? Although not directly Celtic, many see a connection with this people and their spiritual practices. Every sunrise and sunset that illuminates these structures seems to whisper the stories of those who came before. Perhaps we will never fully know what happened to the Celts, but their spirit lives on in the legends and in the land they so revered under the starry sky, where the constellations still form part of their ancient tales. The Celts remain as a reminder that even the most vibrant cultures can disappear, but their essence is never completely lost. In the arid deserts of Paracas, Peru, a stunning discovery shook the world of archaeology. Among the tombs excavated in the sand, human skulls were found in such strange shapes that they seemed to define nature itself. These elongated skulls with volumes that exceeded those of an average human being raised more questions than answers. Since their discovery, they have been the subject of speculation and intrigue. Some of the skulls, decorated with intricate funerary textiles, seem to belong to a culture that revered cranial deformation as a symbol of status. The techniques used to shape the heads from infancy were brutal but precise, using boards and ropes to slowly alter the shape of the developing skull. However, there was something peculiar about some of these remains. The bone structure did not quite match known human parameters. Archaeologists worked among the graves, facing suffocating dust and persistent mystery. Some skulls showed anatomical differences that seemed impossible to attribute solely to cultural practices. They were heavier, with fewer cranial sutures and unusual features that raised a disturbing question. Were these people human, or did they represent an undocumented genetic variation? Theories about the quickly multiplied. Some researchers suggested that the Paracas could have belonged to an elite caste that used this practice as a way to differentiate themselves from the rest. Others, more daring, proposed the possibility that these skulls were evidence of contact with entities from other worlds. The deformation marks did not fully explain the anatomical peculiarities, leaving the door open to speculation about their origin. While experts examined the remains, the local inhabitants told stories of ancient gods who walked among them. The elders spoke of great wise beings, tall and mysterious, who taught the ancient inhabitants to read the stars and cultivate the land. Although these stories lacked tangible evidence, they added a mystical hue to the mystery. DNA analysis carried out decades after the discovery raised more questions than answers. Some results indicated unknown genetic origins, while others suggested connections to distant cultures. However, no theory could fully explain how such an isolated civilization had developed such advanced and complex practices. As archaeologists excavate more tombs and analyze new remains, the mystery deepens. What drove the Paracas to make such modifications? Was it a simple matter of aesthetics, Or was there something else, something we have not yet grasped? Each skull, like an unsolved puzzle, seems to look to the future with the same intrigue with which we look to the past. The skulls of the Paracas remain a symbol of the complexities of our shared history, a reminder that humanity's deepest secrets may be buried right beneath our feet. On the island of Crete, under the reign of the powerful King Minos, a work of architecture was erected that defied both reason and courage. The labyrinth designed by the brilliant craftsman Daedalus. This intricate structure became a prison for the half-bull, half-man beast known as the Minotaur. Man, half-bull, known as the Minotaur. The labyrinth was not only a trap for its victims, but a symbol of Minos' absolute power and the fear he inspired. It was said that the labyrinth was so vast and complex that once inside, it was impossible to find a way out. The high stone walls, cold to the touch, rose like impenetrable barriers, covered in moss and shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The corridors wound in unpredictable directions, and the echoes of footsteps mingled with the distant roars of the Minotaur, causing the hearts of intruders to tremble with terror. Every 9 years, 7 young men and 7 maidens were sent from Athens as a tribute to satisfy the fury of Minos. One of these expeditions marked the arrival of the brave Theseus, Prince of Athens, who swore to end the tyranny of the labyrinth. Armed with determination and the help of Ariadne, daughter of Minos, Theseus ventured into the darkness of the labyrinth with only a sword and a thread that would allow him to find his way out. Ventured into the darkness of the labyrinth with only a sword and a thread that would allow him to find his way back. The confrontation between Theseus and the Minotaur was fierce in the heart of the labyrinth, where light never reached. The hero and the beast fought in a clash of opposing forces, human courage against bestial ferocity. Finally, with a precise blow, Theseus managed to slay the Minotaur, thus ending the horror that had tormented Athens for so long. However, the story did not end with the death of the Minotaur. The escape of Theseus and Ariadne marked the beginning of a new series of conflicts and betrayals that would echo in Greek legends. The labyrinth, though empty, remained a symbol of the enigmas of the past, a reminder of how humans build structures not only to imprison monsters, but also to confront their own fears. In Crete, the winds that sweep through the ruins seem to whisper the names of those who walked through the labyrinth, whether in body or in imagination. And so the myth persists, a story that reminds us that often the greatest monsters are not those who imprison, but those we carry within us. The journey we have embarked on through these unsolved mysteries is only the beginning of a quest that continues to captivate our imagination. Each story is a fragment of the vast puzzle of humanity, an echo of a past that still holds secrets waiting to be discovered. But the real mystery lies not only in the answers, but in the questions that remain to be explored. And that is what makes each of these stories so fascinating. If you want to continue being part of this journey into the unknown, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories full of intrigue and wonder. Also, tell us in the comments which of these enigmas has captivated you the most and what you would like us to explore in greater depth in future videos. Your choice could be the next story we tell in detail.